All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to Saturday. Weekend is here. Everybody celebrate, right? If you haven't already. Hey, how's it going? Everybody still need to give me a little help today. I'm a little thin on the information up front. I was trying to get a focus, and I don't think I was able to. But we'll get through it. Let's get some links out and roll on through. But there's your weather snapshot. Looks like the East Coast South is ready for some more rain. Like they haven't had enough of that yet. I don't know where it all goes. You may know where all that water goes. But it looks like it's quite the good showers going through the Rockies too. Looks like 01 Crom's probably getting some rain. Then all out in the southeast, it's looking pretty rough. Hey, M. Long, good morning. How you doing? Did you just get rained on, it looks like? How's the flooding situation out there? It just continues to roll through there, it looks like. Been a rough, almost like a spring all summer, it seems like, with as much rain has been going on. Hey, Try and Survive, good morning. Oklahoma. All right. Let me try to get some other things pulled up here. While we get some people, wait for some people to roll in and look at the weather snapshot here. our fire situation out here in the West hasn't changed a whole lot. They are getting them under control. We've been missing a lot of the smoke the last couple of days, mostly because of the wind shift with the weather. It's not been so much. They've gotten a little bit under more control, but a lot of them are still burning pretty heavy. You think this is going to clear out by Sunday, M. Long? Just in time for that stuff that's in Denver to get to your house? Yeah, I bet that's a heavy rain if it wakes you up. Without lightning, right? If it's not the lightning waking you up, it must be some pretty heavy rain. But also in the weather, it looks like there was a hurricane bearing down on Hawaii again. So they're looking at another potential storm there. Previously, that just swiped south. Looks like this is on the same similar path. Well, but it's 1,300 miles east of Hawaii, Hilo, Hawaii, at least. With a projected path there to the south, so more heavy surf and all that good stuff for Hawaii as long as it stays down there. Hopefully it doesn't run across them. Once again, if you had your Hawaii visitation plans, delay or get them in early. Looks like they're talking Thursday being about that latitude, so it could get ugly about that time frame, depending on which island you're on, of course. I mean, if you're on the Big Island, is what it's going to be closest to right off the bat, but other islands might not be as phased. But it is a Category 4, so that's a pretty big hurricane. We're naming this one Hurricane Lane. The last one was Hector. What happened to the I? They skipped H to I to L, H-I-L. But all kinds of cool graphs. But yeah, just a warning there. I seeing some action. Not out of the woods. Don't forget about them. And speaking of hurricanes, I've been fortunate to miss a lot of hurricanes, I guess you would say. We've had tons of rain and stuff, it seems like, but there's been we had the one that went up the coast, Scotia, but really no hurricane has hit the mainland or even the Caribbean. Doesn't seem like there's been a lot of hurricanes this year. I've not been watching the weather like daily, but in here, we haven't seen many hurricane warnings or anything that I can recall. Anybody? M. Long, anybody? It's been a pretty quiet year, which is still got a month and a half or so to go. But knock on wood a little bit there, to go with all this ready that they don't get more hurricanes down there with you all, pretty much. There's a snapshot for that. Again, the hurricanes, the biggest thing there for the U.S. What else is going on in the world? Everybody put any comments or links out in the side chat if you got something on the radar that you want to bring up. I'm going to start off here with, well, water wars are always a big deal. We talk about around the world and whatnot. So this was an interesting article. This has been decades in the works. Vegas has been trying to steal water from other rural counties out here in Nevada. It has big playing in from underwater aquifers elsewhere in the state because, of course, the rural counties don't have enough legislative support and cover to help them out. And monetarily wise, with lawyers and stuff, it's hard to fight it. But the state intervened this yesterday or the day before, and there was a decision made on this. So it was a water rights application that the Southern Nevada Water Authority had submitted that they would have needed to legally pump water from rural Lincoln County, White Pine County, down into Las Vegas. So the ruling was by the Division of Water Resources, and it's a previously approved application, as it says here. And again, the locations are 4 rural valleys in the eastern parts of the state because the valleys usually have the aquifers underneath, the groundwater underneath them. The water was said to be enough to supply about 150,000 homes for decades. Just to extrapolate the math out of that, 150,000 homes times your average 4-person household. I mean, that's what, 900,000 people? The last thing Vegas needs is 900,000 more people. Where's Tony? Is he going to check in here with us? Can Vegas handle 900,000 more people? Physically, a little less water-wise. And if they don't have the water to support growth, which is the big conundrum everybody is always stuck in, is everybody thinks that growth is the solution. But the problem with everybody is they're just trying to keep up with inflation. But currently, Vegas is almost exclusively supported by the Colorado River, and Lake Mead is having issues with its height, which is also another recent article here on Lake Mead's issues. So obviously the rural counties fought this pretty hard. Some of the arguments were harming plants and wildlife. I mean, yeah, that's probably an understatement. Ranchers and others water would suffer. It'd be a lot harder to ranch in valley areas where you can't get groundwater out. So Basin Water Network made a written statement. With the denial of these applications, the state engineer, this ill-conceived multi-billion-dollar boondoggle is now dead in the water. Everybody's happy about that. String of court victories. We have a decision showing that the water is not available for this project without hurting the area's existing water rights and environment. It's all based on preemptive water rights. Actual people that were first in line and have preeminence and tell Vegas to wait your turn and don't come over here and try to steal our water. This is going to be an issue for a long time because Vegas is going to be desperate for water. They've been counting on this it's been works for over 20 years, try to get this plan in place. As it says here, previous applications were approved in 07, 09, 12, and 13. The Nevada State 7th District Court issued a remand order that directed the department to address issues. with previous approvals. So is the quote here from the Southern Nevada Water Authority spokesman is, today's ruling by the Office of the Nevada State Engineer demonstrates the difficulty in faced applying state water law, which while also complying with the court's contradictory remand order. The ruling serves as a prerequisite for the state engineer to challenge aspects of the remand order, and we look forward to these issues being resolved as they move forward into the district and the Nevada Supreme Court. So they're going to take it further. But preemptive water rights are preemptive water rights. I don't know how they're going to get around that. That other people are using the water that is there. There's only so much, and you can't take more that leaves them with nothing, which is what essentially that would do for those areas. So the name of the valleys here: Spring Valley, Cave Valley, Dry Lake Valley, and Delmar Valley. So the state engineer wrote, in the effort to protect the integrity of Nevada's water laws, the Division of Water Resources intends to appeal sections of the mandated instructions that threaten to upend the historical application of Nevada water law and water rights, which Southern Nevada doesn't care about. They don't know what water rights are in a lot of respects. So that was interesting, and they've got a link to the actual decision here, it looks like, to why it was denied key findings. That's not too long, 2 pages. So anybody involved in water fights, the little guy can win, I guess, at some point, as long as somebody bigger steps in at some point. So most of us were glad to see that. Tony's getting out of Vegas, so this doesn't bode well for Vegas development if they still have to rely on the Colorado River, which, where was that article about Lake Mead getting down to record low levels? Where did I see that? And I was going to bring that along. Yeah, it's actually in Zero Hedge. So not only Vegas, but LA, a lot of Arizona, even I think a lot of Colorado is fed by the Colorado River, which goes into Lake Mead, which they're going to try to get more water out of it. So it says here, Lake Mead is running dry again, is on track to fall below a critical threshold in 2020, according to a new forecast by the Bureau of Reclamation. So fancy graph. In 2016, Lake Mead water levels dropped to new record lows. So they got a brief reprieve last year when we had the really wet winter up and down the west. So they got a little bit of a rise, but it's already spiked back down. It looks like there's a 52% probability that water levels will fall below a threshold of 1,075 feet elevation by 2020. This could cause the Bureau of Reclamation to cause a water shortage and lead to significant cutbacks for Arizona and Nevada. So if water shortage is declared, that'd be a huge shot across the bow that water supplies could be uncertain. It's interesting they talk about Nevada and Arizona, but what about LA? Because as it talks about here, the Colorado River supplies over 40 million people with water from Denver to Los Angeles, has been in long-term decline in what Bureau officials call the driest 19-year period in recorded history. So as of Wednesday, it stood at 1,078 feet, which is just 3 feet above the threshold of declaring a shortage. With any number of third order effects, you figure, like we're talking about this Vegas planning for all these houses and how to get water, it severely limits growth when you don't know where you're going to get your water from, right? Unless somebody's going to fudge the numbers and just make it up and say, oh, we got the water, and then it'll run out one day with everybody sitting there holding the bag. Farmers in Arizona, which would be among the first states hit with cutbacks, are taking precautionary measures. The Maricopa Stanfield Irrigation and Drainage District could lose about half of its Colorado River water if a shortage is declared. Say they are working on alternatives such as digging more wells, which is a zero-sum game. They're going to run out of their own groundwater. This area has 60,000 acres under cultivation between Phoenix and Tucson. Could potentially have 15% of its planted fields left fallow. So then you're talking about food and actual food shortages, or as it says here, 15% of its fields are fallow. I think they grow a lot of, what do they grow out there? There was that other story we covered a couple weeks ago where they do a lot of almond trees, which are huge water suckers. One water researcher warned the problem is not going away and is likely to get worse, perhaps far worse. It says as climate change unfolds, but is it really climate change here that's the problem? It's just human usage in in desert areas. All right, checking in real quick with the side chat. We got people popped in all over the place there on me. Locked and loaded, 100%. Justin, good morning. How you doing? ZPD Survival's with us. You're at 80 also? You're at 80 degrees already? Barry Wood joined us. Good morning. Jet001, how you doing? Good morning. We're talking about how if you missed it, we were talking about how we're keeping water out of Vegas. They're trying to steal it from the rural counties. ZPD Survival's replacing a hydrant, so trying to access his own water. Holly Baglio, good morning. How you doing? Hope I said that last name right. I could butcher that pretty easily. Too many people, not enough rain, right? Well, in a lot of cases for the western states, it's not enough snow. The snow melt is a huge part of getting these reservoirs full. And there's just a slight difference between what happened up here in the northern part of the state and what happened down south and in Colorado last winter and last couple winters. We're pretty good up here on our reservoirs, but just I don't know where the divide line is. You just go a little bit south where that watershed goes into the Colorado. The snowpack wasn't at sufficient levels to continue trying to refill these things. So that's kind of the critical difference there. Plus, they just have too many people sucking straws out of the Lake Mead. LA is a never-ending disaster story waiting to happen, and Vegas is trying to follow in their footsteps, and it's not going to end well, because eventually they're going to try to come and take the water without approval if things keep going the way they're going, and just say they're just going to try to run roughshod over people to go into these rural areas and take farmers' water and these rural valleys and stuff all throughout the Sierras, Northern California, like we talked about here in Nevada. It's going to be a continuing problem because they only see growth as the only answer to economic problems when they need to innovate. So that's some of the stuff going on here in the West with the water. We've talked about a lot about the water shortages in other parts of the world in many other chats. And one of our favorite places to check out the ongoing collapse, Venezuela, remains in the news, of course. So out of the UK, Venezuela crisis, panic people rush to shops and form huge queues as economy collapses. This is from yesterday, so it's updated. We've seen continuous stories and food lines and people rushing to food convoys and everything else over the last year. Ain't nothing changed, it doesn't seem. Trying to get these in the description box as I go through them. I'm assuming there's going to be a video with this, so we'll check that out. Shoppers are panicking in response to hyperinflation, which, if you hadn't heard, Venezuela's latest bizarre idea to combat inflation was they're just going to take 5 zeros off the currency. We're just going to change what the currency says, and that'll make it okay. That's how they're going to fight inflation. Genius. I wish I'd have thought of that. Shoppers are panicking in response to hyperinflation is making cash increasingly worthless, ensuring their homes are stocked with food before the measure decreed by President Nicolas Maduro takes effect on Monday. This measure will see a new set of banknotes introduced with lower denominations and internet banking operations suspended for several hours on Sunday evening. The majority of transactions are now made via debit cards and over point-of-sale terminals, and many people worry the change could collapse financial networks. So they're going to do a bank holiday on everybody, try to recoup as much in interest as they can while everybody else can't access their cash, and then they're going to redenominate their money, taking zeros essentially away from them, and they think that's not going to cause inflation. These people are fools. Inflation is estimated to be as high as 82,700%. Oh, goodness. The number just gets more and more unreal. Purchase of basic household items requires piles of cash that are often difficult to obtain. Yeah, and we talked about this last month even, and just like taxi services and stuff. A lot of things like that were going out of business, and they weren't able to meet the supply. And like a lot of people were just using their own vehicles and bartering and using, just trading for food or whatever to provide rides to people. Like in one of the cities it was talking about, like cash is so hard to come by. This barter is already well in place there. IMF predicts inflation could soar as much as 1,000,000% before the end of 2018. Remember, Venezuela was a fairly modern country. People should not dismiss the effects that the way this has happened in Venezuela. People are so quick to just assume that it's just a third world country or whatever. Venezuela was in the 80s, especially, and into the 90s, a very on the edge modern country. As you can see here in this picture, the guy's driving a Mustang GT. It looks like, or something to that effect. They had a living, relatively speaking, and that's about to come to an end. Going on. The roads were bare in the capital of Caracas on Friday as shopkeepers prepared for the overhaul. Maduro has claimed Venezuela is a victim of economic war led by his political rivals and insisted that the measure would bring stability to the stuttering nation. Yolima Manrique, an assistant manager at a home appliance store in Caracas, told Reuters, "This is going to be a complete disaster. We don't have information. It's going to be crazy for the clients and for us. I will bet it will be." Another gentleman in the western city of San Cristobal raged, "I don't understand this money conversion. The government has not explained how it will work or what salaries will be. How are we supposed to buy things if we haven't even seen the new bills?" Oh, goodness. This is not good. The confusion over the new monetary notes has seen poor Venezuelans without bank accounts carrying wads of cash to make basic purchases. And I bet you if you look hard enough, you'll see plenty of bartering going on as well. Especially go out in the outside of these big cities. You get outside of there's probably tons of that in the rural areas. People just reverting quickly back to that process. Buying a kilogram of cheese, for example, worth the equivalent of $1.14 at the most widely used exchange rate, requires 7,500 notes of 1,000 bolivar denominations, a note that was only brought fully into circulation in 2017. A bar of soap, which sells for the equivalent of 53 cents, requires 3,500 of the same notes. So the overhaul from Mr. Maduro is unlikely to mirror the chaos seen in December 2016 when the president removed the largest banknote in circulation without replacing it. Back in then, protests broke out, shops were looted, and hundreds of people were arrested as the country was effectively left without legal tender. Well, I wouldn't say that won't be the case this time around either. Already showing people have pretty much cleaned out store shelves. Shop makers don't have money to go buy new goods, new food stocks, or anything because they don't have any access to money. Yeah, it's bad. And it doesn't get any better. It doesn't seem like what's coming out the other end. See what say in the side chat here. True results of socialism, right? Yeah, no doubt. One of the large effects when you nationalize your biggest national resource in oil, it all goes downhill from there. A roll of toilet paper is worth more than a roll of cash, right? Yeah, the mass media, Holly, does not touch this story, and it's been going on for years. Literally, I mean, we've been talking about it on this channel for a long time, and in particular since January, really focusing in on Venezuela, and there's never a dull story.
that comes out of there. Every week, it's a new example of the disaster that it is. ZPD brings up that China may be moving in down there to position to take the Panama Canal. I thought they already ran the canal. Didn't China already run the canal after we gave it up? Didn't they move in and like they're the ones that actually operate it? The channels and locks and all the different stations are actually Chinese contractors or something like that. I thought. Yeah, and China has been trying to get into Venezuela with different naval port visits. Russia too, for that matter, a couple of years ago with military visits and stuff like that. But I don't know. Nobody's really talked about them stepping in to assist Venezuela in this effort. Moving on to the other Venezuela story of the day. So again, focusing in on how they're changing their money overnight. They're also affecting their what they call their forex rate. So he said, President said Friday night he would establish a single exchange rate that would be pegged to his leftist administration's cryptocurrency. So yeah, last couple of weeks they've just established a cryptocurrency tied to their oil reserves. So denominating their oil in cryptocurrency, trying to go modern potentially, make an end run around some of this mess. But of course, if most of your country doesn't have the electricity to operate such things, what good is it going to do? But it will potentially help them in dealing with other countries and exporting some of that stuff potentially. That's a real short article, though. It just came out last night. Just basically saying they're making that currency exchange that's tied to cryptocurrency for their what they're calling cryptocurrency. It's tied to their oil process. So that's almost a decent attempt to try to do something, but we'll see if it actually has any effect. So more problems there. And it all could be tied to China, like you're saying. And China's biggest move is in the South China Sea, though. Don't make no doubt about it. Their intermediate AO is the area they want to assert the most dominance over. This would things like Venezuela are on their periphery. That if they could get allies or trading partners, that's fine. But when you look at we talked about China's long-term economic growth they were looking at. CNBC did an article a couple months ago that we talked about where they had this extensive land network they were putting in from China across Asia to Europe with road and rail networks that they were building the infrastructure for, and all the different trading partners they were looking to implement and what those resources meant. And then there was also the sea lane network they were establishing all the way down through South Africa with all these different ports and port agreements from Indonesia, India, down Africa coast, and etc. So they're looking at doing some large economic expansion with this. It was a very robust plan. It was very detailed too. There's some interesting graphics that went along with it. It was pretty cool, but it was not short on vision, I guess you could say. It was very dream big, I guess you would say. They were definitely dreaming big. Hey, we got Walter Davis checking in. Good morning. How you doing? So that's that situation in Venezuela could get critical this Sunday. We'll be trying to stay on top of it Monday morning. We'll see what happens. This is one of those cases where in other times, back in the 80s or something, you could almost wake up, even in the 60s and in the early 1900s. This is one of those cases where you can almost expect to wake up on Monday morning and see that Marines have secured the Capitol or something and installed the opposition government or something, because we think about the Banana Wars and a lot of the stuff, the Dominican Republic in the 60s, stuff like that. America was we were notable for when things like this were going on to step in as a sign of stability or whatever we wanted to call it at the time, because it is in our sphere of influence in our region, following the not only the Monroe Doctrine, but what was it called when pretty much everything in the Western Hemisphere we consider to keep it stabilized, I guess you'd say, and especially when in response to communism. But a lot of that's changed. So moving on, speaking of water, land, and economic issues, Russia offers 2.5 million acres of farmland to China amid a worsening trade war. And this gets to the point of, when it gets right down to it, what's worth something, the value of what you're trading. It actually has to be worth something. And there's always been the speculation that when China called America's bluff that there would be a trade for American land, that there are land swaps already in progress, that places such as in Idaho are already being accessed by the Chinese, Arizona farmland, these agreements have been kind of under the table. And a lot of it has to do with response to the keep the Chinese happy because of the devaluation of our currency and stuff. But here's a straight up announcement. China and Russia recently announced a new age of diplomacy between the two countries at a time when President Trump is targeting both with economic warfare. China finds itself reeling under trade disputes with the U.S. as the next round of tariffs on $16 billion worth of Chinese goods is expected to start August 23rd. Earlier this week, Russia offered to bail out China from the trade war with Washington, as Moscow offered 2.5 million acres of arable land available to the Chinese farmers to meet its large-scale demand for soybeans, and of course prevent massive soybean shortages, which would lead to big problems in China. Political and social upheaval, as they say here. But if people start starving, it could get ugly. Maybe the U.S. trade war on China should be interpreted as a piece of a much larger chessboard, a war on Eurasia integration, or the One Belt, One Road initiative, which is what I was talking about. That's what they call it. I'd forgotten the name of it, but that whole Chinese economic project, One Belt, One Road, is crossing Asia to Europe. That's what in Chinese, I'm sure it sounds different. There's a graphic of what it looks like. Pull that up. This is what I was talking about. They got this from Bloomberg, but yeah, basically they're making a land route across to increase trade and economic zones from China, and the same with the sea routes. That's all part of this big initiative that it's like 2035 is when they want to put it in place. Something like that. It's an ongoing large-term project. Some analysts and experts are skeptical about the quality of the plots available, talking about the land that Russia has given to China, or has proposed to China. As reported in the South China Morning Post, several Chinese investment firms have shown a keen interest in solidifying an agreement with Moscow. Far East Investment and Export Agency said on Tuesday that Chinese, Russian, and other surrounding countries have already expressed tremendous interest in the farmland. We expect most of the investment to come from China. We expect 50% from China, 25% from Russia, and 25% from other countries like Japan and Korea. Dabrowski, who is the director of that Far East Investment and Export Agency, said that all of the 3 million hectares of farmland in Russia's Far Eastern Federal District is now available to farmers, adding that the region could become a hot spot for dairy farming or the growing of crops such as soybeans, wheat, and potatoes. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why there would be that much land that wasn't already in high use in the places like Russia. That would be my question. Is like, isn't this already under development?
Congresswoman Jackie Rosen said she'd never.
Inadvertently, Trump's trade war with China could be a game changer for Moscow as it expects foreign investment to flood the region. Right? There's always a vacuum created by situations like that. Whoa. So the South China Morning Post notes that residents have already acquired premium farmlands. So Chinese farmers might have to settle for inferior and low productivity lands in remote areas. The general director for the Russian Consultancy Institute for Agricultural Market Studies, Dmitry Rylko. Man, these names are getting hard. I have to study up on my Russian and Chinese, I think. I have to get started getting these names right. Dmitry explained a majority of the fertile land in the Far East region had already been acquired through Chinese businesses, have been rushing to sign leases and other temporary agreements. So yeah, some of it's already under development. The best lands are occupied and have been heavily exploited by domestic farmers. So if they want it more, it will be predominantly in remote and low productivity areas. So it's about the equivalent of either you get your farmland in Nebraska or you get your farmland in Nevada. You get low productivity or high productivity. Which, if you're starting to grow things in low productivity areas, that means uses artificial fertilizer, lots of weed killers, stuff like that. It's all going to be very bad farming methods. It's not going to be well-established farming methods because they're going to be trying to maximize it for the lowest dollar. And that's going to require a lot of that artificial support. Not to mention where's the water coming from, because likely if it isn't productive, a lot of it has to do with water probably. China has an enormous appetite for soybeans, as it has just accepted the tariff by allowing an American vessel to dock. The move marks the first shipment of U.S. soybeans to be accepted with the 25% tariff stemming from the trade war. Yeah, you figure it's going to take a full season to get any of this land under development to even begin growing the soybeans needed to offset that. So they're going to have to, especially through the winter, basically take it in the shorts, economically in particular. It seems like China is willing to accept higher soybean prices in the short term, but the long-term plan is clear. Cheap, arable land in Russia's Far East could be China's next source of soybeans, thus bypassing U.S. farmers. U.S. trade and agricultural experts have warned President Trump's tariffs on China could deliver a devastating blow to rural America. Because we ship a lot of soybeans, but also farmers should be smart enough they switched gears decades ago to grow soybeans to profit from it. There's other potential profit crops that they could switch gears to. You would hope they would have enough common sense to do that, but these tariffs make it very difficult to plan for that. What are we saying out in the side chat? Walter says China's copying the American model of 1900. Right. Economically speaking, potentially they're not quite as militarily ranging the globe yet, but plus they don't have as many partners. A lot of our American model in 1900 had to do with our partners that especially when you think about how we went into China about that time, the Opium Wars and all that other stuff, we were pretty much playing side fiddle with Britain and everybody else, the other colonial powers, if you will. Walter's pulling apart his engine in his truck. That should take some time. We won't be here that long, so you might have to be on your own for a little bit. Moving on down the side chat. The Saint, how you doing? Good morning. Silk Road, yeah, that Chinese economic plan does mirror a lot of the old Silk Road, right? It's a modern version of the Silk Road, I guess you would say. HRM said China's a bunch of hype. I don't know. Anytime you get 1 billion people together, you got enough manpower to do something. HRM says Asian prison camps are great investments for China's global plans. Oh, that doesn't sound fun. And HRM says commerce switching back to cotton and wheat. As long as they get markets for it, you'd have to. The biggest problem with cotton is that so much of the competition is in synthetic fabrics nowadays that, cotton kind of got pushed to the side. I guess it just depends on what people are wearing in that respect. And they keep destroying food products with things like the Roundup and stuff. People are starting to catch on. They shouldn't be eating them. So maybe we can get some farm smarter, not harder, I guess. Moving on here. So in the U.S., the administration has already prepared a $12 billion farm bailout to cushion farmers. However, rural Americans face the risk of losing lucrative export markets to Asia that have been established for decades. It seems as this reality is now starting to be realized. Well, you'd think. So this is interesting. This is a quote from the South China Morning Post. Beijing has already significantly reduced its soybean purchases from the U.S., and as a result, a record 850,000 tons of soybeans from Russia between July 2017 and the end of May, according to figures from the Russian Agricultural Agency. But that represents only a fraction of the 800 million tons of soybeans China has imported so far. Whoa. So they bought 850,000 tons from Russia, but they import 800 million tons of soybeans. Wow, that's a lot of soybean. 800 million tons. Anybody want to do the pound figures on that? We were looking at several billion pounds. Well, anyway. Accordingly, that was the latest figures from its custom agency. The Agricultural Ministry in Beijing said earlier that it had ramped up domestic soybean production significantly to deal with the threat of shortages and would make it a further 1 million hectares of land available for growing the crop over the next 2 years. And that's where you get into the whole real principle of economics of competitive advantage. When you have a competitive advantage over somebody, you export what you are better at and you import what you're not so good at. Apparently, in the past, China didn't feel like they were in a good enough position to grow soybeans at that level, but now they're going to have to go back to trying to import it just because of the price, the costs associated. Goes back to competitive advantage. So they close out, as the quality of Russian farmland remains questionable for Chinese farmers. Chinese trade dispute with the U.S. does not seem to be waning anytime soon. So they keep talking about this Russian farmland, and they keep talking about the Chinese farmers. It sounds like they're going to actually take Chinese farmers and place them in Russia. Like Russia's not going to make it available and grow things like corporately, but like Chinese corporations are going with Chinese workers and grow the soybeans. And that is why China has now made a move into Russia as a long-term hedge away from the U.S. The shift is likely to be a devastating blow to rural America as decades of old export markets into China shun Western products. That's the potential. That's the concern over this whole tariff war thing. But will American farmers have a way to transition to something different as China seeks this hegemony over pretty much all the Eastern world with their trade networks that they're trying to establish? Walter retracted a comment. M. Long says a lot of fuel oil for those freighters to move that. Are we talking about the prison camps getting filled up, M. Long? Walter says China propaganda ministry says starvation will be minimal this year because of the large insect and rodent populations. I don't know if I'd go that far. They probably would come out with some statement like that, though, if they had to. I think people, and we talked about this when these tariff issues first came up, the Chinese are much more nationalistic in their outlook than we are. Them as a people are much more willing to endure shortages and trials and tribulations compared to the Americans. If this came down to suffering in the long term, they are fairly used to it, and they're much more adept to do that. While they have been westernized in a large extent, especially I think in those rural farming areas, they're still nose of the grindstone hard workers that will do what they need for the country. We'll see how that shakes out. It's going to take, it'll take a decade to see how this ultimately affects everything. Short of a war starting between now and then, but economically, the full impact, you look back 10 years from now, you'll be able to map it all out, and look at the stats and the trends and see what happened and reactions and actions taken in response. So that's most of our hour, folks. Anybody else got anything on their radar stands out? We kind of hit the water wars here out west. A lot of the issues affecting our local area as well as the region, and just how important water is and some of the effects we could be seeing coming up. Be on the lookout for. And looking at Venezuela as the poster child for collapsing economies. It's there right in front of us. So remember, links are in the description box below. If you've been with us since the beginning, when you refresh, you should see them, or when you come back later, they should be in the description box if you want to check those out. I think I still have to get one clicked over there. But on the weather side, stay dry out there in the east. It's been a rough summer for y'all. we're hoping we get just enough cool, calm weather to get these fires under control, and we don't have to deal with this smoke for much longer. So yeah, lots of rain going on this action this weekend, the rest of the day. So if you haven't mowed your lawn yet, you're probably not going to be able to in a lot of those areas as the afternoon thunderstorms and everything kick in. But go ahead and have a great weekend. We're probably going to do a chat this evening if anybody wants to drop by. I'm putting my notes together on a roast of the president for his tyrannical actions, but I got to get my ducks in a row before I do that. Y'all be coming out hating on me. So y'all have a good rest of your weekend if I don't see you before Monday, and we'll see what how far Venezuela's fallen down the collapse after this revaluation on Sunday. All right, be good, live free.